Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to another Trident webinar. Today we're talking about security. I can see that quite a few of you are joining right now. My name is Gavin May. I will be the MC for today's event, and I also have Garrett O'Hara with us from Mimecast, who will be talking to you. I can see we're getting quite a few attendees just joining, and that's really good. Look, we've got lots of customers here today, lots of new customers and lots of existing customers from education, aged care and health. So welcome all of you. Obviously, it's very interesting times here in Victoria and around the world, obviously, but in Victoria. But look, today I just seen that there's 14 new cases and a 14-day average of 25.1. So we're definitely heading in the right direction, which is just absolutely fantastic news. And hopefully we'll have some good news on Sunday as well, and we'll be able to get up and go around a little bit. And given that the fields that most of you come from in education and aged care and health, look, a big shout out and a big thank you for all your efforts, really. It's just been amazing, and I know you guys have been absolutely working your butts off over the last 7 months, and I just want to say that we all really appreciate it and appreciate the support. So thank you very much. I'm just going to fill in a little bit until we get going. So look, a little bit about Trident whilst we're here. For the new customers that are on this call, we've been going for 36 years now, and we are an integrator of ICT solutions and a managed service provider, mostly in Victoria. We have had some customers outside, or do have some customers outside of Victoria. And we've worked mostly in the aged care and the education sectors. Again, we do have some customers out of that, but probably I would say a good 95% of our customers are within those two fields. And it's been an interesting year for us as well, because back in February, we merged with Spirit Telecom. And Spirit is an ASX listed company that have got pretty ambitious plans and been pretty busy this year. Also acquiring some other businesses, and it's been great to be part of that family and to be able to offer our customers bigger solutions and better solutions. So we now sort of are part of this group that's got a presence all around Australia, but especially up the East Coast, from Melbourne through to Sydney and into Brisbane and the Gold Coast. And that's great. And we, as Trident, do a heap of work in security. And I've seen a lot of what goes on out there. So look, I suppose our approach around security is that we sort of see this as a multi-pronged approach. And I draw the analogy about what you would do with your house. You don't just lock the front door. You put up some screens on the windows and put locks on the windows. You've got your back door locks. You've got an alarm system, maybe. Probably we're putting up cameras. I know I have. And, you know, maybe even 2 locks on the front door. And we've got a gate outside as well, right? And the same is true with ICT security. We used to sort of, I suppose, a few years ago would go, well, as long as we got antivirus software. Then it was kind of like, okay, we need the firewall. Now we're sort of talking about doing network security, email security, and staff training and bringing that into the mix as well. And I know Gar's going to talk about that shortly. But I thought that as well, I just talk about a little bit about the notifiable breach, data breach report. And I was just looking at that earlier for the first 6 months this year. And again, it's pretty interesting reading. You can look that up online and see what it says. But we've got a bottle of wine to give away, and I will just pull up the Q&A or the chat. So we've got the chat there, and this is question time. So first one in there gets a bottle of wine. See the chat. And what I would say to you is, of the 5 sectors that are listed on the notifiable breach report, who was number 1? What industry? John Talantis, wow, you're quick in there. Yeah, 38% of breaches were in the health. And that was followed by finance, number 2, number 3 was education, number 4 was insurance, and number 5 was legal and accounting. So John Talantis, well done. You were first in there. We will get you a bottle of wine. And I think what that sort of kind of leads me on to as well was we found out some information, and this came from Stuart Wilson, who found some information about a dark web shopping list. And, you know, we always sort of think about credit cards and how much is your credit card worth? Well, credit cards have actually got a pretty low value, because generally we report a missing credit card within sort of 48 hours. They've kind of got 48 hours to use it, right? But this dark web shopping list that Stu found, a hacked Gmail account is 155 USD. A hacked Facebook account, 55 American dollars. PayPal details, 67 American dollars. Bank login, 55 American dollars. A driver's license, 550 American dollars. Emergency roadside assist membership, $70. But here's an interesting one that our former Prime Minister fell foul of the other day, is passport details, 1,500 US dollars. And of course, you know, we've seen that he put an Instagram picture up of his boarding pass, which had his passport number on there. So really simple ways of falling foul of this, and you know, these are the values and the costs that are put up there, right? So there's more to the security than just, you know, protecting your systems. It's a lot about educating your users and making sure that users are intelligent and don't put themselves out there so much. And I think as well, interesting watch the Netflix show that's on at the moment about the internet and about social media. So it's very interesting indeed. Now look, what we're going to talk about today is obviously about Mimecast and generally about security with GAR. You'll hear about sort of threats that this leader in cloud security is hearing from thousands and thousands of customers and what they monitor on the internet. But we know that Mimecast is all about email security, but I think that probably some of the other things that are in there for our existing customers here who've got Mimecast, you know, there's the awareness training, the Mimecast Clouds archive. So there's this bottomless cloud archive for storing emails, and with fast searching on that. Email continuity, if Office 365 or if you know, your Exchange goes down. Sensitive information protection, there's content control, DLP, secure messaging, large file send, e-discovery and compliance, and Mimecast sync and recover for Exchange and Office 365, which is all about, again, archiving and cyber resiliency. So there's a heap that Mimecast can do, but we're not going to focus so much on that today. We're going to talk about general security, right? And this is an interactive session. We really want you guys to interact with us and to ask us questions. And down in the bottom there, you'll see there's the Q&A. If you can ask any questions in the Q&A, you know, please feel free to at any time. I'll look at them and interrupt Gar and you know, pass them on, and he can answer them, or say, well, I'm going to cover that in a minute. So, and then we've got some time at the end. Hopefully you've all got your Uber Eats and you've ordered something great to eat. And with that, we will move over to Gar. So look, I've got a formal introduction message here that I need to read about Gar and his bio. So Garrett O'Hara is the Principal Technical Consultant at Mimecast, joined in 2015 with the opening of the Sydney office and leading the growth and development of the local team. It's over 20 years experience across development, user experience, technology, communication, training, developments, and mentoring. And Gar now works with organizations that help understand and manage their cyber resilience strategies. We're not talking about the cyber security landscape, data assurance approaches and business continuity, Gar can be found running, surfing, and enjoying the many bars and eateries of Sydney's northern beaches. Lucky Gar, because we can't do that at the moment, but we will do soon. And Gar spoke at one of our Trident Health events at the Esplanade in St Kilda, and I found myself sort of sat next to him during dinner and had a great conversation about security and breaches. And then I said to him the other day, I was flicking through the TV channels one morning, and suddenly he's there on Sunrise, and I'm like, wow, this guy's he's on TV now as well. What is there no limit to what he can do? So with that, I'm going to hand over to Gar, and I hope you enjoy his presentation. Gar, welcome.
Thanks, Gavin, and thank you for the very, very kind intro. Let me just get my screen share going here. And we were joking before we started that I have to ask the obligatory question, can you see my screen? It has become a bit of a joke, but I'm going to assume that people can, and if they can't, that I'm going to hear about it in the chat or the Q&A. Excuse me. Look, so today we're going to cover what I think is a pretty popular topic at the moment, and it really kind of asks the question, are your employees sitting ducks? But in reality, kind of maps across to what I would say is achieving remote cyber resilience, and it relates back to all the things that Gavin has just talked about. I'm going to start out by looking at some of the kind of macro trends that have been happening over various time lengths, but have been accelerated and kind of impacted by COVID. And then what I want to do is look at some of the priority shifts we're seeing with our customers, but I'm guessing are potentially similar to what many of you might be experiencing or have experienced. And I'm going to overlay results from a couple of different studies and surveys that have happened. So one with IT News and one from Forrester around this kind of remote worker problem. As Gavin has said, any questions as we go, he's kindly offered to interrupt me, and that way we can kind of keep it interactive as we go. So I'm going to open with, it's Friday, so something that maybe seems a little bit frivolous, and it's looking at Google Trends. And for those who maybe aren't familiar with Google Trends, it allows you to see what people are searching for and allows you to basically look at the popularity of particular search terms. So I went looking at the data, and I was particularly interested in the popularity of shirts versus pants. And this is from Google Trends. And you can see basically over time, pants tends to be more popular than shirts in terms of search terms. And then that week of 8th to the 14th of March, you can see there's a dip, and then it starts to kind of rise again. And then there's an inflection point, and it sort of swaps over where shirts become much more popular or more popular than pants. And I'm guessing people can kind of figure out what's going on here. There's a lovely example of this, which appeared on Twitter, and it's kind of gone, it's gone viral. And I'm actually thinking about doing something similar, because if you could see what's actually behind me right now, it certainly doesn't look as pretty as the background that Trident have kindly provided. But this is a lady whose name is Gretchen Goldman. She's a PhD and a research director. She's on CNN giving an interview and really just talking about her perspective about kind of climate change, etc. So on Twitter, what she did was she kind of posted what it looked like when you were a viewer on CNN, and then actually posted the kind of A/B comparison and showed what it actually was like in the room that she was doing the CNN interview. So kids' toys everywhere, well dressed, obviously, but kind of ignoring the bottom half and doesn't really care too much because nobody can see that. So I just thought it was a perfect example for this kind of weird world that we are all living in at the moment, or many of us, I should say, are living in. So what we're really into is just a whole new set of challenges. The photo on the left-hand side, I actually took that photo on my phone. I had to go, I'm in Sydney, and this is Wynyard Station for folks who know that place. And that station, generally, that photo was taken just before 2 p.m. on a weekday. And anybody who knows that station would know that that's a weird photo, because you would normally see tons of people waiting on the platform, people getting on trains, getting off trains, but there's nobody there. And that's because the world obviously has changed so dramatically. And what we were hearing was in December 19, which just seems like such a lifetime ago. February 2020 was when the penny was dropped in the organizations and for us in Mimecast. But it was March 2020 when, for us, everything changed. We met as a leadership team that week, and we kind of did a pilot work from home day on the 13th of March, which was a Friday. And none of the Mimecast employees have been back to the office since that date. Everything changed. Schools shifted to online learning. Healthcare has gone to telehealth, and they're kind of straining, I suppose, under a lot of what's happening at the moment. Budgets got frozen, projects were put on hold. It was really unclear what was going to happen. And the reality was that fewer in-person interactions and the social distancing stuff kind of changed the rules of the game. And then this like full-on lockdown, which obviously is happening in Victoria, and I'm assuming is probably going to happen at stages as we kind of fight this thing into the future. But it's really created an entirely new game in many ways. So that's fine. Like, everyone's kind of aware of that. But like, what are the other things that are happening? When I've been thinking about this, I actually think there's three really big trends and three different timelines that are all kind of coalescing to the point we're at today. And the first, thing I would say is like we're obviously living in very strange times. Australia is seeing its first recession in 29 years, massive global change. And, today we're not in the SB, right? We're doing this in Zoom. And that's kind of become the standard format for these things, because really there's no opportunity or no possibility for many people to do a face-to-face kind of meeting for these things. So the longest trend, I would say, is this kind of global digital interdependency that we see. Very long-term shift. It's been happening for quite some time. And I would say it's not controversial that the people who make things like filing cabinets, for example, they're making less money than they were a year ago, 5 years ago, 10 years ago. Everything is now digital. Everything is moving towards that as a standard. Not all industries, granted, but it's that momentum and that kind of motion towards things becoming digital. So we share information through EDI, API, endpoints, email, text, messaging apps. And then with COVID, what we've seen from many organizations is this kind of acceleration to digital. Teams, Slack, folks using WhatsApp for communications. We're using Zoom right now. And the reality is we're all tied together digitally. So how we do security obviously then means that we kind of potentially put other people, other organizations at risk, depending on how we've approached that. So that's kind of like a longer term trend. There is this kind of more medium term trend, I would say, which is around the kind of geopolitical and socioeconomic instability that it's fair to say we're seeing globally. And again, this was stuff that was happening anyway, but COVID has just been like petrol on the bonfire. So it's accelerating the symptoms and really exaggerating the effects of something that was happening anyway. And from a security perspective, what it's led to is really a perfect set of lures, and it's a perfect time to attack for the folks out there who are attackers and doing the bad stuff, because what you've got is a very distracted, anxious workforce. And then also an IT and security set of teams where, because they've been so distracted by COVID and spinning up collaboration platforms, they're just distracted with that stuff quite often. So it's just, it's a perfect storm and perfect camouflage for attackers. And then the shortest term trend is this kind of work from home. And not just work from home, but work from home at scale. Because I think many organizations would have had opportunities for parents to work from home if their kiddies were sick, or if a partner needed help, or any of those things. Life admin, sometimes you just need to do your thing from a home environment. And it was a trend, I would say, that's kind of, we saw kind of increasing anyway. Flexible workplaces as kind of a desired characteristic of hiring organizations. And the emergence of things like WeWork and officeless companies was the thing that was happening anyway. So if you take all three of these trends, but then you overlay the perennial problems of things like human error, technical failure, malicious attackers, and for the most part, companies now are trying to deal with, and organizations are trying to deal with, the avoidance of what we would consider potentially seismic disruption. And these really are, as I say, strange days we're living through. And what I would say is, like, regardless of vaccine availability and regardless of state level or national level exit strategies, what we're expecting to see is a continuation of a permanent shift in where people are working. And the reality is we're going to see more of a mobile workforce. And, for organizations, that's either going to be on a permanent basis, or you're going to see it as part of a flexible work arrangements. But it's just going to be more common. I think that's the reality. So what that means for security teams and their longer term goals is that their priorities are starting to shift around, and we're seeing some new sort of priorities kind of emerge because of that. That word cloud, excuse me, that you can see on the screen, and that actually comes from the Australian Bureau of Statistics. And they ask a question which is around the aspects of life that people would like to see continue post COVID-19. And when the restrictions are lifted, what would you actually like to see continue? And actually 25% of folks who responded are talking about the idea of working from home continuing. So I think it's something we need to be mindful excuse me, mindful of when it comes to security strategies as we move forward. So what kind of happened? If you roll back to mid-March and before, I would say, and really 2019 in many ways, pre-COVID, we, when we had conversations with our customers, generally we were seeing something like this. It wasn't always the case, but it kind of averaged out to, a priority number one being some investment in cybersecurity, those programs. So whatever the goals were, there's this investment in security and cyber resilience, looking for the right platforms to meet requirements, implementation, normalization of those platforms, all of that good stuff. There was a motion and a movement to the cloud, and lots of organizations we see kind of moving workflows and workloads to the cloud, and that obviously makes sense for many things. Gavin mentioned O365 as one example, but there's plenty others where cloud just makes sense. And then the education of users, that for many organizations was sort of number three, could often be number four, number five. It wasn't necessarily kind of in the top three, but it was on the radar in some way. And then COVID happened. And the reality was when I was talking to security and IT leaders, they were just trying to adapt. They were just trying to survive. And when that transition to the kind of new, it wasn't new normal at that point, but this kind of new way of operating where large amounts of of employees were transitioning to work from home environments, the just core focus was how do you get that working? How do you enable that? So whether that was setting up VPNs or scaling VPNs to cater for more people, shipping hardware to folks who are now working from home environments, figuring out what the collaboration platforms were that they needed to spin up, licensing changes that maybe were needed, but ultimately trying to just get everybody set up so they were productive from home environments. That's a massive challenge. And I know from many people I spoke to, they were working incredibly long hours. We're talking just a huge amount of fatigue setting in for just many people. But what I would say is we're sort of on the other side of that a little bit. And we're kind of now into this kind of idea of new normal. So accepting that, longer term and coming back to those ABS, Australian Bureau of Statistics stats. Look, the reality is like this world we live in right now is probably going to be a little bit funky and a little bit different from what we're used to, and it's going to probably last for some time. So what we've seen is this kind of shift where new normal is really the priority being education of users. And I'm going to talk to why that's the case. But COVID, for most organizations, what it lit up was just a huge increase in phishing attacks and attacks in general. And because people were working from home, it became very clear that education and the human firewall was actually a key component of any cyber resilience or security strategy. And then the rest of the priorities were things like normalizing this new reality. So again, back to the ABS word cloud, understanding the kind of how we work now is probably going to continue. And then, what are the investments? What are the strategies we need for that? Securing against more threats, really, to be honest with you, you could almost boil that down to how do you do more with less? And less can be less budget or less employees or less resources. Again, investing in cybersecurity, moving to the cloud. This one is an interesting one because for many organizations, COVID actually expedited and accelerated the move to cloud because it facilitated mobile workforces and work from home. So actually for many organizations, you could see that number 5 there be probably nearer to a 2 or 3. And then the ongoing discussion around efficiency through automation. So what are the ways to make security operations and the job of doing security more efficient, often through automation. So if there was an opportunity to use things like SOAR systems for remediation, so that support staff and security staff weren't spending so much time chasing like false positives essentially quite often. And when there was something that needed to be responded to, that it could be done with a click of a button at machine speed versus human speed, which is kind of the traditional approach. So I'm going to pivot over and look at some data. And this is around the first 100 days of COVID. This is actually a report which the team at Trident can forward on to folks if they're interested in this. And it comes from our global threat intel team. And I looked at the first 100 days of COVID, and the stats there are pretty obvious in what they're saying. There is a huge uptick in terms of malware detections. Impersonation/social engineering attacks were up about a third, and then 56% increase in the blocked URLs. So a huge spike. And this is just volume of attacks. So there's nothing implying sophistication here. It is literally just a lot more of the bad things are starting to happen. So that report is available, and as I said, I'm sure the Trident team can help make that available to folks who are interested. So I'm going to use some of the stats from an IT news survey, as I said, that we had done for us at Mimecast, and it was just shy of 400 respondents for that. They were CSOs, CTOs, CEOs, business owners, various other IT professionals, and it was kind of across what we would consider large orgs, so plus 1,000 people, and then the rest was fairly evenly spread across kind of small and mid-sized businesses, and they were in IT industry, finance, education, healthcare, government, telecommunications, so a really broad mix of people. And if you're like the person in the photo there, this kind of points to the problem. He's happy in his socks, and I'm pretty sure he thinks that he can relax in the security stuff because he's at home. And psychologically, that just feels a little bit different than when you're in the office. So it sort of points to that problem. So what we were kind of keen to understand is there actually a direct line between working from home and increased risk? And in the IT news survey, for me, there's a couple of really interesting things that came out of it. The first number, so the 1 in 20 who were asked the question, what does work from home mean for breach rates? 5% or 1 in 20 of the respondents said that they had a breach that was reported that was involved somebody working from home. But that's not the important number here. The important number is actually the 31%, because that means basically 1 in 3 organizations are really saying they don't know if there was a breach involving work from home. And for security practitioners, that's something that would make them uneasy, because we generally want clarity. We kind of want to know where our risk is at. And what I would say is that number points to actually a kind of a worrying lack of clarity. And I'm presuming it would be causing a lot of stress for a lot of people. And it lines up with the stats around the technology being used to monitor cybersecurity compliance. And again, when they were asked, the respondents were asked, how does your organization know if employees are following cybersecurity best practice when working remotely? And you can see here that about a quarter of respondents had no idea whether their employees are actually following cybersecurity best practices from home. And that can suggest that companies are very distracted by just the response to COVID-19 to really deploy monitoring processes. But really, it says that essentially the companies are entrusting the security of their networks to the users who are sitting at home with their families, potentially, in Australia, depending on the employee types, could be with people in a flat share situation or other people in a shared environment. So, that could have implications for sensitive company data. I'd say the good news here, though, is that you see 3/4 of respondents have put in some sort of technological measures to monitor cybersecurity compliance, which is great news. And sorry, I just got is that the 3/4 of respondents saying their organizations have used technology to monitor cybersecurity compliance, and generally that's going to be email security, which makes sense. But web security is also a really good play here, because it could be really fast and effective in a way that users' ability to visit either website categories that are undesired or known bad sites where they're sitting away from that office perimeter protection. I'm just going to pause very quickly, because I just got a message from Zoom saying my internet connection was unstable. And just Gavin, could you just nod if I'm going okay and you guys can hear and see me okay?
Yeah, you are. You're going okay. And look, I'm not sure if this is a good point, but we've got a question from one of our staff, Rob Yule. What has changed with actors targeting users and user behavior based on the COVID-19 pandemic? Maybe you're going to answer that.
So honestly, that now looks like we practiced this, and
Yeah.
we didn't. That's incredible timing. The big thing is that with the anxiety and the distraction that's happening for people at home, like we've got people with kids, with partners, with pets, school runs, all the stuff of life that's happening at the moment. That's a perfect time and a perfect camouflage for attackers. And weirdly, we didn't practice this, but this is an example that you can see on screen where um, the attackers basically pivoted and changed to use COVID as the way in, or the social engineering lure. And you see this at other times, right? If you think about Valentine's Day or Christmas or Black Monday or Black Friday, Cyber Monday, all those times where the attackers know people are maybe waiting for deliveries, or there's something bigger going on in the world. They use that and they kind of ride that wave, and they're doing exactly the same thing here. And this example here, you can see there's an email that's come in around COVID, and go to a survey for the seminar, put in your credentials, and then what you'll see that is often some version of brand jacking, whether that's government at state or federal level health entities, or brand checking across trusted brands, really. So there's no implication of wrongdoing, and hopefully that's obvious here with the Australian government or Netflix or Disney. They have nothing to do with this stuff, but attackers will use their brands to socially engineer, in this case, Australian citizens. So you see a lot of things like fake Netflix or Disney Plus or Stan emails saying your account's been frozen. And the reason is people are often sitting at home in lockdown, just binge watching, the latest cool thing like that. The Social Dilemma that you mentioned, Gavin, amazing documentary, by the way. Highly recommend watching that. It's phenomenal. But that's the idea. They'll use those things because people are at home watching these things. So the attackers know that, and they'll take advantage of it. So this, happens to be hopefully that answers that question. Here's another kind of data point. I particularly like this one, and because you rarely get in my experience, like really useful, actionable data. Depending, if you're doing threat intel well, then you probably are. But this chart what you're looking at here is basically two things. But what it's showing is a really strong correlation between users who've had awareness training, in this case it's Mimecast, and their propensity to click on malicious links. So what the chart here is doing is cross-referencing user behavior and using kind of link clicks as the proxy for that, to the clicking of, to the use of awareness training. And weirdly, what you can see is around the 13th of March, again, there's this inflection point where without user awareness training, you see this huge spike, and the ups and downs are basically they're mapping to the Monday to Friday, and then it drops for Saturday to Sunday. And it's 5 times more likely to click on links when awareness training isn't in play. And to me, that's just an incredible indictment of how important it is these days to do awareness training well. I'm going to dig into that now. So, like, what is it that makes good security and awareness training programs? I love this quote, and it's funny because within Mimecast, when they use this, there's often a lot of why is he talking about salad? This is, it's pointless. So what do you want about? It's a quote from a guy called Mike Beresford Kingston, and it's the idea that knowledge is knowing that a tomato is a fruit, but wisdom is not putting it in a fruit salad. And that's perfect, right? That actually makes a lot of sense. But the analogy here, I would say, as it relates to security awareness training, is that knowledge is not enough, but neither is wisdom. You actually need to get security outcomes. What that is a lower risk profile for your organization. So you need behavior to change. It's not enough knowing that tomatoes are a fruit salad, or tomatoes are fruit, and that you don't put it in a fruit salad. You actually need to go make the salad, and that's the bit that's often been missing. It has to be part of the culture. If Bob from accounting needs to be engaged enough not to be kind of lazy and click on something that he thinks looks a little bit weird but does it anyway, or Alice, who sits in the HR team, needs to be engaged enough with this stuff to report the odd behavior that she saw on her machine just after she clicked enable macros on a resume that looked a little bit weird, and it was for a job posting that she didn't even know they had. it's that we need engagement, we need culture, and that's the bit that's missing from what I would consider to be the standard approach for awareness training, which is often information transfer, and we know that that just doesn't really work. So what does the IT News survey tell us in this stuff? Well, I'm going to say, when you're asked the question, how does how does your organization educate employees about cybersecurity, best practices for remote work? Some of the things that you can see on the answers here are things that you probably need to do from a policy perspective. So they don't really change outcomes for security, but you might have to align to like an ISO certification or standard. So you need to send out, a list of guidelines. That is a thing you need to do for that certification. I'm going to say quite often it's not going to move the needle for your security outcomes or the end user behavior, or it could be stuff that you need to do for cyber insurance to make sure that it's valid if the time comes when you need to actually check, go and use a policy. But what I would say is, as an industry, we're actually starting to see the behavior change model take over. So we're moving away from just trying to give information and actually acknowledging that, hey, we need to do behavior change, not information. And New South Wales, as a state, at a government level, they have engaged a behavior change team as part of their security and awareness training program, and that points to the shift that we're starting to see. So piling in on the data.
We've got a question here, Gar.
Awesome.
How do you keep awareness training fun and engaging without making it seem like a chore or a barrier? And you may, if you're going to answer this coming up, then by all means just carry on.
I sort of will, but I might just answer kind of directly, because I think it's a really important question. The reality is, I think what we've done as an industry is use computer-based training platforms or learning management systems, which are great platforms for information transfer. And what they're not great for is getting the thing of messaging security through to end users whose jobs have nothing to do with security. And what I think we've done wrong is often use security jargon and lingo. And we've had complex messaging. We've used messaging modes that are just ineffective. So I would say things like email, they're sort of useful, but they're not where you need to stop. And I could talk about Mimecast here. The approach we've taken is kind of, what do people do these days? We talked about Netflix and the social dilemma, but the reality is, like, people get that as a medium, and they also kind of get the Netflix type humor. So content for us is delivered in like 2 to 3 minute videos that are almost like mini sitcoms. So same characters. There's like the really dumb person, there's the really kind of smart person, there's what we call human error, sound judgment, and a simple single situation that they find themselves in. So, don't click on a link, change your password. Very simple, but core messaging that we need, and done in a simple way. And I think that's a thing that's become just really important. I can tell you that having conversations with security leaders, they're doing things like even using a group policy to push out the desktop background that might be a little bit irreverent. It's not information, but it's an irreverent message that people remember about security. And the one example I can think of, I probably can't say in this because it was slightly rude, and I probably don't know people well enough, but the result was pretty good from that. But it's been that creative thinking that way, and I'll talk about it a little bit more as we go along. Hopefully that kind of answers the question. So I'm going to just pile in on the data a little bit here, and this is actually from Forrester Consulting. They did a piece of work in collaboration with Mimecast. I mean, they did the study, but we were kind of in the background involved. The numbers here really, for me, they tell a story, and it's that a third of employees are actually going around security policies. And what that really means then is that you don't have that engagement at the level you need. So they're going around policies that puts your organization at risk. But what it points to is that you have employees that sort of understand but aren't engaged maybe with the importance of cybersecurity. And that is, as I just have said, it's because we've delivered the traditional security and awareness training programs that are long-winded. They're often boring. They're delivered by an LMS system. Somebody lets the video play on the second screen. The compliance team get 90 or 95% completion rate, and everyone feels like they're happy, but nothing's really changed. The behavior piece hasn't changed. And that's because the content, whoever asked that question probably has a sense that the content is being delivered in a way that's not getting cut through, but the culture is also missing so often. You need to have employees kind of looking left, looking right, looking up, looking down, and seeing how important this stuff is to the broader and wider organization. The second big problem here is how we're actually measuring the success of AT programs, because the reality is often we're not, and that's a huge problem in and of itself. So we don't even know if, as we're running awareness training programs, are they effective? Is stuff changing? There's a lot of fish testing out there. It's very, very popular, and it is useful. Don't get me wrong. It's very useful as a point-in-time measure, but it's measuring one very, very specific user behavior, which is don't click on the link. And I'm also going to say that it's a test. That's all it is. It's not a behavior change thing. It's not really education. It's giving you an idea of what's happening within an organization. And you may see some behavior change which falls off so quickly over a day or two, because people maybe clicked on a link and get a warning saying, hey, yeah, you did the wrong thing. But in reality, that doesn't last. It's not true behavior change. Cybersecurity, look at the behavior change here takes longer. It needs a combination of the knowledge transfer, definitely, but also how you apply that knowledge. So what you want is the knowledge, and you want some sort of gauge on the sentiment and the engagement of the end users. I think that's kind of really, really important. And acknowledging that information just doesn't change people's minds. This is a photo that I believe has become pretty famous, but it's from St. Kilda Beach. And this points to the problem. It's not a cybersecurity problem, it's a human problem. You have really important information, and you've got an audience that are in HR or finance or practicing aged care, carers, healthcare practitioners. They have their job to do, and cybersecurity is not the core part of that. So how do you get cut through and get that messaging across? And this actually circles back on that question, where what you do is you just take a leaf from the marketing and advertisers books. They use fear, they use love, they use respect, but mostly they use humor. And I particularly like the middle one. We're looking for a graphic designer. I think that's awesome. But that's how advertisers make this stuff memorable.
I've got a quick question. Does the awareness training extend to phone attacks, either text or voice call, to create awareness on that? I think we've probably all had a text saying it's from the ATO and we need to pay our tax, etc.
Yeah, so look, our awareness training platform is extensible, and it covers broad security. So part of that is, and I would call it like the broad cybersecurity culture that would make somebody cynical enough to, if they got a vishing or a smishing attack. So at the moment, I'm getting so many SMSs because and I feel bad for people in Victoria, but in New South Wales, you can still go to cafes, but they make you scan a QR code to check in. And there's all these apps that have just spun up. I was never getting SMS, spam or phishing attacks. I get probably 1 or 2 per day now, because it's your choice is either get the bacon and egg roll by scanning the QR code, or walk away. And unfortunately, I love bacon and egg rolls. So when it comes to kind of the potential privacy issues, I've been giving away my mobile number and and name. So I'm getting all these SMSs at the moment. But yes, the answer is our platform is extensible. So the core content covers lots of different security areas. But then if you wanted to, there's another option where you could record your own video that's very specific to Australia and very specific to your organization, which I think is very important. The specificity adds weight to the messaging. And you can make that part of a campaign that gets sent out. And I think that's a useful thing to do is take something that's happening right now and make compelling content, ideally with people that the recipients would know. So it could be somebody who's a leader within the organization or in the security team, and use that as a way to kind of send out awareness on that stuff as well. Incredibly important points, though, I would say, given the huge proliferation of QR codes and what that kind of means to security, and the fact that many people are using now BYOD which means there's this kind of blurring of the lines between the devices for work and the devices for home. And if you go to a cafe or you get an SMS on your work/personal device, that can have implications to potentially data breaches. Again, because of the environment and the way that we're all kind of working at the moment. So hopefully that answers that. So look, as we kind of sort of finish this out and round it out, one of the things that I think I've recently come to put more gravitas on is this idea of threat intelligence. And people are probably familiar with how you can use operation or technical threat intel on a day-to-day basis, and very much helps with the security posture and how to plan and work out strategies for security. I was talking to, there's a guy called Dr. Francis Gaffney who works in Mimecast. He's the leader of our global threat intel team. And I was talking about to him, it's about a month and a half, 2 months ago. And he raised to me what I thought was a really insightful comment, which was the use of threat intel. And generally that's technical or kind of operational threat intel of campaigns that are hitting an organization and using those to get cut through. So if you're doing messaging, swapping out generic examples for examples that are actually coming into your organization, and using those examples. So what are the things that are actively being picked up by security teams, and kind of using those to inform or create messaging that goes out to the end user base. So I don't know. I personally think that that's a really sort of useful insight. If there's any Mimecast customers on here, things like the threat dashboard, hopefully people are familiar with that, but that's a really good way to see what the campaigns are, and then potentially use those to inform end users. What I would say though is it's not always email. And this example here is actually one that came in through LinkedIn. And again, our security teams picked up a fake LinkedIn profile. And I was actually, weirdly, I was one of the people who got the request from this person, but the photo made me just like, I don't know how you pronounce the name. I don't know if it's Mallet or Malay, but that person just looked like they weren't either up for a nice photo or just something was off about it. So I didn't connect. But the point here is that the security team got a screenshot. As you can see, this is Slack that they're using rather than email. So different communications channel. It did come through on email as well, but they use multiple comms modes, screenshots, so it's kind of visual. And the point here is it's not always emails, but like I suppose in reality, it's nearly always emails. Like definitely more than 9 out of 10 times you'll see stuff come through. It's going to be on an email vector. So I'm just going to show another example, and this is fairly recent. This came through from our local messaging security operations center, and it's another example of the. It almost relates back to the question at the start around what does this stuff look like and what are they doing. This one came through, and again, this is more traditional. It's an Oz post brand jacking in this case, and it's a held up delivery that needs another $4. And for my friends and colleagues in Victoria at the moment, most people I know are waiting for 1 or 2 packages. So when you think about it psychologically, this is an incredibly useful social engineering attack, because if you're waiting for 3 packages, probably one of those maybe can be delivered from Ozpost, and if you want it, you're going to probably pay the $4 to get it sent through. So they ask for payment details. Pretty obvious, as Gavin has said, like credit card info is worth some coin on the dark web. So that's the point here. They get that info, they can sell that info, and then it does a redirection, fake redirection, obviously, and then weirdly shows you an SMS key at the end, which, if you paid attention, there was no part where you entered a mobile number. So they've sort of messed up in terms of the UI, but at that point it doesn't really matter because they've got the credit card information. So yeah, just an example of kind of what that looks like. And then as we kind of round out, here's some example data from our threat intel team, and they're all pointing to the same thing, So an upward movement in the virus-related domains being both registered and also being blocked within, in this case, in Mimecast, but I would suspect it's going to be the same for web or for many other security companies. So the point here is, it's an upward trend, but luckily the stuff is being blocked. And again, this is from that 100 days of COVID report. So if you're keen, let the Trident team know and we can get that stuff out to you. So really just to summarize the value of TI then, COVID pandemic, like it's given us more attacks. I'm guessing everybody's kind of aware of that. And what threat intel does, it tells you about the campaign. So what the impact could be, what's the remediation, if there's any tech controls that are needed. So ultimately it gets you to a better mean time to respond. And then, the idea of more sophisticated attacks that will come through more in strategic threat intel. Cosmic Links is a good example here, where it was multi-pronged impersonation, but also like the big game hunters that are out there at the moment, they are going after big amounts of money, and they're looking to be, they tend to operate in a much more sophisticated way. So threat intel tells you about those step changes in sophistication so that you can build that into your security strategies and at least have the conversation around the things that you need to be aware of. And obviously then it helps with awareness training also. So huge impact there. So this is like, as I kind of finish up here, for me, this is just a really good way to think about prioritizing where to focus for cybersecurity when we're kind of going through this weird COVID time. And it just breaks it into zones. So zone one is that established perimeter, the things you can do to create a moat around your organization. So protecting against bad URLs, web traffic, DLP for healthcare information, or PII is a pretty solid example there. Thinking about what's valid internally. So EDR, UBA approaches, AV, MFA, those kind of things. Security awareness and engagement, we talked about that, how to remediate. And then zone 3 has become interesting. So that's the idea of kind of proactive risk hunting. And you have the option these days to go and look for domains on the infinite web that are cousin domains of your organization, where you can maybe see a preview of a site that has cloned your website, has maybe spun up an MX record. And what that lets you know is you might not have seen the attack already, but if you can see a site that isn't yours but looks exactly like yours, that has an MX record, pretty good indicator that that's something that's going to be either used to go after your customers or your employees. But what you can do is proactive takedowns and get rid of the problem before it actually becomes a problem. And then also this idea of connected ecosystem. So again, acknowledging that these days, and Gavin kind of talked about this, security isn't just Mimecast, it's other things within your environment also. Do they talk to each other? Is there efficiency through automation where you can integrate those potentially? And that's worth having a conversation. So, to finish up, I think, the strange times that we're living through, and they definitely are. But one of the things, I'm going right back to Google Trends, I'm kind of happy to see that for Australia, the top trending category, more higher trending than hand sanitizers and wipes, is flavored alcoholic beverages, and it kind of tells you much of what it points to the Australian spirit for stuff like this, and it kind of, for me, just kind of makes me feel a little bit happy that at least people are having a drink and hopefully feeling okay about the world, because we definitely do live in these strange times. And obviously espresso martini seems to be the drink of choice from people. I had to actually go and look up what a White Claw was, but it does sound interesting to me. So with that, look, thank you so much for the opportunity for Gavin and the Trident team. And if anyone has any questions or wants to connect, please do. Co-host a podcast if people are into that, called the Get Cyber Resilient Podcast, where we have guests on in just general cybersecurity. It's not Mimecast really, it's just cyber resilience in general. So thanks everyone, and thanks to Gavin and the Trident team. I think we've got maybe some time for some Q&A.
Yeah, we do. Thank you very much for that, Gar. Look, I've got a question here from Ling. I'd like to get your view on the concept of a zero trust network.
Yeah, I think it's become something that has become. It's funny when zero trust is probably beyond machine learning and AI. It's it's the two words you seem to hear a lot in security these days. I think it's a valid idea, and I think with the erosion of the perimeter has sort of become even more important in many ways, as in there is no network that we will trust anything on. It doesn't matter where anybody is, just don't trust them. I personally buy into it. I think it's a solid kind of approach to security. Yeah. You're on mute, Kevin.
Somebody said that you're on mute. So I've got one here which we've sort of come up with before anyway, which was more around, we've got a fairly broad, gamut of guests on here today from different areas of the businesses that they're in. How do you elevate cyber culture, cybersecurity as a priority within the executive group?
Ooh, that's a that is the question of the century. So my take on this is, I think, as an industry, and when I say industry, I mean the security practitioners, the security teams, the folks running security operations centers or security managers, CISOs. Part of what we need to do better at is talk in terms of business risk rather than the cybersecurity risk, if that makes sense. So, like, ultimately, all of this stuff, security doesn't exist outside the context of business. That's the reality. The only reason security exists is to secure assets and to secure employees. And so a business or an organization can provide aged care or healthcare or education or whatever the reason is for an organization to exist. So starting there, what's the reason this organization exists? What are the outcomes, the strategies for the organization at a kind of business or organization level, and then mapping back to the cyber culture and the importance for success in terms of the overall organizational strategy. You cannot have you won't get success without that link being there. A good friend of mine, a guy called Phil Zongo, who wrote a great book, which I'll strongly recommend. I forget the name of it now. The 7 Anchors for Cyber Resilience. 5 Anchors of Cyber Resilience. Cracking book, but he's a guy who talks about the need for an honest conversation around known state and then delivering to that known state. So another guy called Chirag Joshi, who wrote a book around cyber culture and awareness change. And his comments were around similar things, but having what he called allies. And for him, that was, as security practitioners, finding the allies within the business. And that could be a CFO or the people in finance. That could be HR, could be the exco or the leadership team. But finding those people and building relationships so that when you're having the security conversation, you actually have allies within the organization who are bought into the end state, the clear, known, and realistic end state for cybersecurity. And then thirdly, how they, that cybersecurity program and the cybersecurity culture will directly align to the strategies for the organization, and doing that in business or organizational language rather than doing what I'm guilty of, which is talking about SIEM, SOAR, XDR, and the stuff of security, which for most people it's meaningless if we're all honest. So I think there's hopefully some useful stuff there.
Okay, and I think we just got one last question. What is the safest way to transact online?
Don't. Go to the bank in person maybe. It's such a funny one because it's so efficient to do stuff online. And like my one big thing is when it comes to emails, if you get an email that feels a little bit funny and you're a customer of the organization that has supposedly sent that organization, don't click on the link, just go to the website and log in to your account from there. Because generally, if it's a bank, if it's a like a retailer, they're going to have some version of an account for you. And what that means is that you can go and check messages there rather than clicking on a link, which maybe is going to be nefarious and do something a little bit funny. I can only talk for myself. So I've gone and I was so bought into the message from that Social Dilemma documentary. I'm not on Facebook. I'm on LinkedIn. It's the only thing I'm on. Don't do Twitter. Don't do any of that stuff. I've actually gone back to an actual delivery of a physical newspaper to me every day. I do everything I can just to have nothing online, so that if anyone wanted to use OSINT, which is open source intelligence, so the things of Facebook, Instagram, your example, Gavin, where former prime minister managed to get his passport popped because he posted a photo. Not having an Instagram account is a really good way to not let that happen. So do it if you need to, but there's ways of transacting online that are generally go to the website, the known good website, log into your account and do the thing there rather than clicking on links or clicking on ads or any of that sort of stuff.
Awesome, thank you. And somebody else has posted about multi-factor authentication, which of course
Phenomenal idea. Yes.
yeah, absolutely. We will recommend that. All right, look, thank you, Garth. Thank you so much for today. That's extremely interesting. And what I would just say as well, thank you very much for talking. Thank you very much for Mimecast for sponsoring today. I hope you all enjoyed your lunch. Yes, the social dilemma, I couldn't remember what it was when I was talking earlier, but I mean, I just watched it the other night.
It's amazing.
It's amazing. So watch this as well, very important. I love what you said there, a human firewall. And, you know, we are, as humans, we're often that last line of defense as well, or maybe the first line of defense. But, you know, we're all busy and we see things and we click on them, and, you know, you need to just stop and just think a little bit before. And one of the things I would say as well, that we've done a couple of times where we've had presentations with schools, and other customers around, with Stuart Wilson, who's on this call here, where sometimes when we've introduced this concept of awareness training, and got Stu to actually talk about it. So it's been a third party coming, and there's Stu's just appeared.
Hello, everyone.
As a third party, not part of your organization, so it's not just, you know, somebody from the IT team who's getting up there and going on about security. It's somebody else from outside, and that's come across pretty well. And Stu's always available. I'm volunteering him now there to come and talk to you at any time. So he's got nothing on, so he's fine.
Thank you, Gavin. Thank you.
And look, interesting as well, you know, we've just talked about work from home there. And again, I know that it's not going to be a case for schools and for aged care facilities, for example. But I mean, you know, even at Trident, with Spirit, we're looking at probably a 40% reduction in our floor space, in our office space moving forward. And we will, you know, most of us, a lot of us will be working from home. And it's been proven that we're just as effective, just as efficient, and probably working a damn sight longer. So look, I think fantastic presentation. Once again, thank you, Garth, for that.
Thank you.
This has been recorded. We will send out a follow-up email with a link to where it is up on YouTube. We will also send out a follow-up survey, and we really would love you to comment and fill that survey out and tell us what you think. And look, thank you very much for joining us. Just still got the afternoon left, so hope you have a wonderful afternoon. Hope you have a wonderful weekend. So thank you very much.